So welcome everyone to the My Cashflow Academy community call. It's the last one of 2020, and I know lots of people are super joyful that the last of anything of 2020 is a joyful thing to say, right? Yeah. So we're going to slam the door. But before we slam the door on 2020, I think some gratitude about what we learned is probably a good idea. So I had lots of ideas for lessons, but I thought I would just kind of go through the lessons or in big strokes of what I learned in 2020, or I think what we all learned, but and some of it easier than other things. So I'll go ahead and give my list, and then I think anybody who wants to chime in with the lessons learned, I would love to hear your lessons learned. So the first one that I have on the list, because it's most difficult, I think for me personally, is patience. I had to learn patience with the fact that I didn't know what was around the corner. I had to learn patience with myself because I was getting frustrated that things weren't moving. And mostly I had to learn patience with others, right? So patience with the crews, patience with like almost in my mortgage business, there was a lot of opportunities to learn patience. And so, patience. Number two is, I think a big lesson is heightened communication with team members, whether that's in your business or whether it's in your investment area. I think whatever our, careers during the day, or even if you're retired, a heightened idea of what is good communication, because now we don't see each other, so you don't see body language. I remember the first time I taught the Torrance Unified School District real estate class online. It was difficult because I couldn't see people. I couldn't see in their face body language if they were getting it. And I chose to do it, webinar style, so I couldn't see their faces even online. They were just numbers in a column here. So the heightened communication and clearer communication. Not only are you communicating more often, like with your team members in other states on your real estate investments, you have to reach out a lot more than, say, if you could see them. And that, I think, because we are living so far from some of our investments, that idea that we had to learn heightened communication with others that we normally are with, like our office mates or, people at school, at work, so on, because that, we'll call it a veil, because that extra veil was put on, I feel that many people, including me, learned to communicate better, and that will last a long time because there are people that I will never meet that are handling my investments, right? So the third lesson is reining in our emotions and redirecting our emotions to drive the results that we want instead of blowing stuff up. I'm just going to mute there. I'm just muting you, James, because your air is cutting in on the sound. So reining in our emotions and redirecting our emotions. So some people have the habit of reacting, right? So you hear something or you see something and you react right away, and then you have to kind of calm yourself down to then take steps. Sometimes, and I've done this many times, sometimes I react while I'm still in the emotion, or I take action while I'm still in the reactive emotion, and that's often not a good choice, right? So making better choices about reining in the emotion or just sitting with the emotion till it calms down so I can think logically about what should my response instead of my reaction be, right? So there was, again, lots of opportunity for emotion this year. And so on kind of the flip side of the coin of that is reaching out for help more. So sometimes things happen during this government shutdown, COVID shutdown, whatever you want to call it. When things were completely shut down, a lot of people, including me, felt like, okay, well, I'm all alone, so I've got to figure this out for myself. And being part of a community, being part of any community means that you should or have the ability to reach out, but often I didn't reach out enough. I could have reached out more to get people's feedback on solutions, right? So that was my next one. The next one is just reading the financials more carefully. during this pandemic, there have been a lot of changes in cash flow, right? Whether it's your top line that was wiggly because you had people not paying rent, or you didn't collect late fees that you used to collect, or whatever it is that you changed on your top line, or if expenses went way up. Nothing to do with COVID, but for example, we had a water leak and it didn't get caught. My water bill is every other month with DWP. So that water leak wasn't caught for 2 months. And then by the time we got people out to discover what the problem was and then fix the problem, you're into a big bill for 3 months. And do you think DWP wants to give that money back? Probably not, because they're not technically at fault, right? They should notify you if you have a spike, but anyway, so there are things that are not anything to do with COVID that reminded me that, yeah, we have to watch those financials as carefully as possible, and especially when we're in turbulent times, and make sure that your managers, property managers, if they're going too fast. I mean, I had not with the property managers, but the CFO of the mortgage company that I do my mortgage practice through. He gave me credit for loans that weren't mine. I didn't even know who these people were. So, if he's not watching, then, I mean, that would be to my benefit, but eventually he would have said, oopsie, and taken it back. So, oops, I lost you guys. So we have to be more vigilant with all of our financials, and also question them. So I think a lot of you guys did excellent at that, right? As new investors and as analytical people, I think coming to mind is probably Brooke and Keith. You guys are very detail oriented, so you're going to catch it more. But those of us who are like on to the next thing before the first thing's done, we have to pay more attention and get down in the weeds as much as possible, as often as possible. So going forward might be to choose one, like, for example, what I do is I read all the reports when they come in, and then I set them aside, and then I go back. So usually I look at the reports twice. Well, if there's nothing wrong, obviously there's nothing wrong, but I do a once over, and then I do more detailed, right? And I choose the reports from one manager. Most of them come at the end of the month. So I usually choose the first weekend of the month to just go through all of those reports. So if you have one report, it's pretty easy. But once you get 10 or 11 reports or 12 or whatever, 20, it becomes more time consuming. So you actually have to chunk out the time. Okay, another lesson about this 2020 is holding reserves much more than you would have in the past. So for example, I was trying to hold as many reserves as possible, because if the government, and the government did do this, if the government says, hey, tenants, you don't have to pay your rent if you can't afford it, then you as an investor have to hold as much cash in case you have to pay the bills with no income coming in. That's highly unlikely to happen in the past. But now that we've been through this, I think it is possible that the government does this again. It's similar to eminent domain. Eminent domain is when the government feels that they can take possession of your property at a fair market value, which is determined by them, not by you. They can take control of your property. So again, that's another reason to invest in landlord-friendly states, not tenant-friendly states, because they do have certain powers, and we've learned over the last year that they can stretch out the definition of what those powers are. So we want to be very careful to hold cash reserves as much as possible. Okay, so another lesson learned was taking advantage of a very bad thing, which is vacancies, right? We want cash flow, and here we have no people living in the building, or we had people move out or not pay. So the vacancies, those were an opportunity to fix problems, improve the asset before you start renting it again. And I took advantage of that because I thought, you know what, how often am I going to have a mostly empty building? So I redid a roof, I redid some of the units that needed redoing, termite, put security cameras. So I did all of this on one building so that I hit the ground running in the new year. Okay, so next is kind of accepting the unknown and focusing on what I know to be true, as opposed to the fears or the lies that are in my head about what's going on or what could be going on or what should be going on. And then also never minding the fears and lies that are in the media, the partial truths, like, coming to conclusions on partial truths is also detrimental to being, a healthy person, let alone a healthy investor, because you could start making decisions based on falsehoods, whether they're in your own brain or in the media. You're making decisions on something that never happened yet, and that can be really detrimental. So that was, for me, a reminder, or a bit, not the biggest test, but similar to the first one I mentioned, which was patience, right? Okay. And then the last one for me is appreciating everything that I have. All of a sudden, my sense of appreciation and gratitude went through the roof, because you do hear all this stuff in the media. Although I started disconnecting from the media around May, but appreciating everything that you have, everybody that I know, people I've never met, I'm appreciating them for their efforts and their expertise, and them taking care of an asset that's really not theirs. So when someone works just as hard during chaos that we've seen, that shows me that they're the team members, or they're the strong person that I want in my life going forward, right? Testing people's resolve and their integrity has been huge. So just, appreciating people that I've never met, especially for their support, like the managers, the tenants, the repairmen. Some tenants couldn't pay their rent and still did, right? So you may not know that. I don't know that to be absolutely true, but I do know that the stats show that vacancies were much higher on average in the areas that I invest, and yet much higher than what I experienced. So I can only conclude that I know the managers were super diligent in collecting and communicating on their end. But then also some tenants, chose to do the right thing, chose to pay their housing before their other bills. So I appreciate them, even though I've never met them. So those are not my typical lesson, but I thought lessons learned during this government shutdown pandemic are important for us to, assess what we learned so we can move on. If you never bring closure to something, it's hard to move on. So I'm going to call that my biggest lessons for 2020. And